and me as a Christian preacher. And one thing that folks saw immediately that was going on was stuff that many folks who were older like me had seen in Jim Crow South, had seen in segregation, had seen when I grew up in Baltimore. What the IDF was doing is exactly what white police officers were doing in black communities in Baltimore, which was harassing, humiliating, and basically pushing people around because they believed that they had the power and we had none. But one thing that we also saw was the clear strength of the Palestinian people, particularly the Palestinian young people, who continued to be out there, who continued to demonstrate, who continued to witness, who continued to stand up even in spite of going to jail, to stand up day after day and not forget those who had gone to jail. And we stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people as they struggle for self-determination and as they struggle for sovereignty. In November of this year, we're intending on taking 20 black clergy to the West Bank so that we can begin to raise up voices in the black church that's going to address this issue that needs to be addressed in the church because it is a moral issue. You can't oppress people and somehow take that immorality and make it moral. You can't kick people and push people around. You can't steal and all of a sudden, no matter what you claim, you can't make that immorality moral. So sisters and brothers, I'm glad we're out here. I'm glad Christian folks are out here. I'm glad Muslims are out here. I'm glad that Jews are out here. I'm glad that people of conscience are out here. But one thing I do know is we carry on a struggle and it's victorious when we stand on the idea and the principle of faith. Of faith. And the reason I say that, I want everybody to understand this, and even folks who have never thought about faith, I want you to understand it, is that when you look at the odds, and the odds seem to be stacked against you, when you look at the forces and the powers, and they seem to be stacked against you, when you look at the history, and it seems to be stacked against you, it is faith that makes you stand day after day. It is faith that makes you challenge that which is wrong. It is faith that makes you stand up no matter what somebody is staring back at you with. When I was in Hebron, I had this experience. And you know how it's set up in the tension in Hebron. You got the mosque, and then you got a synagogue. And I wanted to walk around to see what the flow of the synagogue looked like. And so I walked through the park across the street. And I looked at plaque after plaque that was in that park that was set by Zionist organizations in Chicago. And I read the long list of names that were benefactors. And I strolled to the next plaque and looked at the long list of names that were benefactors. And then I turned around and I realized that there was one armored vehicle sitting in front of the synagogue when I started my little walk. And now there were 5 armored vehicles in front of the synagogue, and all of them were looking in my direction. Well, I grew up in Baltimore, and I knew at that point it was time for my feet to take a stroll down the street and hook up with the group that I was with. I knew what the score was. And by the time I got to my folk, all of a sudden we had a platoon of these soldiers running at us with automatic weapons and screaming for our papers. Screaming at us and pointing the guns and demanding that they see our papers. I remember I had my hand in my pocket like this, and it was on my passport. I could feel the pages of my passport. But as much as I told my arm to move, my arm would not move. My arm would not bring that passport out of my pocket. And it came down to the end when everybody in my delegation had shown the passport. I was the only one now that had not shown my passport. And there was this pimply-faced white boy, and I'm saying that, y'all, so quote me on it. Pimply-faced white boy who I later found out was from Chicago, who started pointing his gun rapidly in my face, demanding to see my papers. And I didn't want to antagonize him too much because you know the way scared folks can be with a gun. And I finally just simply said to him, "Why?" And his answer was, "Because Arabs are not allowed on this road." And then I had to say to him, "Well, since Arabs are not allowed on this road, then you don't need to see my damn papers." And I turned my back and I said, "You need to shoot me in the back." And I began to walk away. And they didn't know what to do. The reason they didn't know what to do is because they bring their power with all of this naked force against Palestinians, and they frighten and intimidate people so that nobody ever questions them, because if folks question them, you can be blown away. I knew I had a little bit, not much, but a little bit of protection because I came from the United States of America. But I was going to, as I told my daddy, I said, I am going to be struck down by lightning if I was to stand in a foreign country and to make some 18-year-old with pimples on his face demand that I produce his papers. He was going to have to kill me there in Hebron if he was going to see my papers, because I have more dignity than that. I've been through more struggles than that as a black man, and you can kill me any day of the week. Come on, if you think you got it. You see, the issue is we got to, all of us, every single one of us. It does no good to talk about justice and then do nothing about justice. It does no good for us to say all the right things and then don't physically commit ourselves to making the wrong things right. It causes some expenditure of energy and effort, and it calls for each of us to put ourselves on the line, to stand up and make it be known that we absolutely believe what we claim to believe. I've been speaking all over the country on the whole issue of the occupation, Israel and Palestine. And as I say to everybody, particularly in some of these college audiences that I speak to, when they ask me, well, what can we do to affect the situation in Palestine? And I say to the young ladies, and I said to the young men, I said, when somebody comes to ask you out on a date, ask them, what is their position on Palestine? Ask them that question. When you sit down at the dinner table with your friends, ask them about what do they know about Palestine. When you find yourself standing on an elevator, ask somebody what is their position on Palestine. Because you see, basically AIPAC is loud, got money, and the fact is their money cannot beat our voices if we dare to open up our mouths and speak to each one. And in the end, I'm proud of my United Church of Christ, because 2 years ago, we voted to boycott companies operating out of the illegal settlements. And we also go even further. We support the BDS movement. Support the BDS movement. That means you got to familiarize yourself with it. It's not just enough to say I support the BDS movement, because products from illegal settlements are sold in your malls and in your grocery stores. You need to begin to let those managers know that they need to remove those items and remove those goods. We got to begin to create a real ruckus, a real economic ruckus, to begin to change it around. Now, I remember this. I was a part of the Free South Africa movement, which basically was organizing to do a number of things to create boycott against South Africa. I was in Boston in those days, and I ran a picket line every day for over 2 years. I mean a picket line through the blizzard, a picket line through the heat, a picket line every single day. We were out there. It took a while to begin to change that tide on South African apartheid. And in fact, when I was in seminary, organizing around and against apartheid, I remember getting called in by the president of my seminary, who looked at me and said, if you want to remain in seminary, you need to stop talking about this South Africa stuff, because all of them are communists. And I looked back at him and I said, well, I guess you got to do what you got to do, because I got to do what I have to do. And somehow we're at a divergent place on the road. So either you will come around, because I'm not going to come around to your position. I stand in that position confirmed. And it took all that time to convince folks that apartheid was real, that apartheid wasn't somehow a part of respectable culture or respectable governance. It took all that time to teach folks and to demonstrate and to challenge folks. It took all that time to begin to change the mindset. And even when we got an affirmative vote in Congress, that person named Ronald Wilson Reagan vetoed it. Y'all remember that? Ronald, that's 6 letters. Wilson, that's 6 letters. Reagan, that's 6 letters. 666. Right? I know from my scripture that 666, it says, is the name of Satan and the name of a man. Right? So I don't, that symbolism doesn't fall out on me. But I realized we had won that. We won that the instant that he had to go against Congress and he had to go against public opinion to try to hold on to South Africa. You couldn't hold on to it any longer. And that's the way it's going to be with Palestine. You can't keep covering up this nonsense. You can't keep covering up this injustice. You can't keep covering up this apartheid and this oppression. Sisters and brothers, there is an arc in the universe. It's long, and yes, it bends towards justice. And I'm going to be here and kicking on and doing on as long as the Lord allow me to kick on and do on. And you need to stand and continue to kick on and move on and do on as long as the Lord keeps you on this side of living. Don't allow your mouth to be shut, and don't allow your legs to be still. God bless you and continue to struggle.
Is that the issue of justice, period. We don't, whoever we are, Muslims, Christians, or Jews, we have to come to understand jointly and cooperatively that we do not have justice while Zionist Israel colonizes Palestine.
Daryl called me last night.
I've heard some
They want to do a documentary
everyone used the
on
word occupation.
the prison, the outcome
This
of
is
prison,
not an
prison
occupation. It is much more than an occupation. It is a colonization of Palestine. The first step towards doing justice in the Holy Land is to call a spade a spade. To say that Zionist Israel is colonizing the Holy Land and colonizing Palestine.
So you get the money.
Now let me shift
We can
gears
talk about
for a
the money
moment.
thing, but you gotta give me those memory cards. I said
There
I can't
is
work
a
without
conflict of
They're
psychologies
expensive.
before there is a confrontation of militaries.
interviews and all
The
that.
conflict of
So I'm
psychologies
just gonna
is
map something out
between
generally
a
what people have to
psychology
say. And I'll
that
see what they
prides
have to say.
itself